Jake Riley was 3 hours into salvaging parts from the impounded freighter when he heard it. A sound so soft he almost missed it over the hum of the station's life support systems. A whimper. He stopped, wrench in hand, listening. There it was again. Coming from somewhere behind the massive coolant tanks in the cargo hold. Jake wiped the grease from his hands onto his already filthy work pants and squeezed between the machinery. The cargo hold smelled like burnt plastic and something else he couldn't identify. Alien ships always had their own weird smells. That's when he saw her. Wedged in the corner, pressed against the cold metal wall, was a dragon. Jake froze. Dragons were legendary. Rare. Powerful creatures that most people only saw in history vids or behind reinforced glass in museums. They were worth fortunes. Governments went to war over them. But this one was different. She was tiny. No bigger than the dogs Jake remembered from Earth, the golden retrievers his grandma used to keep. Her scales, which should have been brilliant and shining, were dull and patchy. One wing stuck out at an angle that made Jake wince just looking at it. The other was folded tight against her body. Scars crisscrossed her hide like someone had been careless with her. Or worse, deliberately cruel. The dragon looked up at him with mismatched eyes. One was clouded over, milky white and probably blind. The other was bright amber and filled with an intelligence that made Jake's breath catch. She wasn't just an animal. He could see that immediately. She was scared. Jake slowly lowered himself to a crouch. "Hey there, little one," he said softly. "I'm not gonna hurt you." The dragon trembled but didn't try to run. Maybe she was too weak. Maybe she'd given up. Jake carefully backed out and found the ship's manifest on a nearby terminal. It took him a few minutes to decrypt the alien script, but when he did, his jaw tightened. The crew had dumped her on purpose. Right there in the official log. Genetic defect. No commercial value. Specimen abandoned per Regulation 447B. She'd been on her way to a meat processing facility on the outer rim when they'd scanned her and realized she'd never grow to full size. A dragon that stayed small was worthless to them. So they just left her to die in the cargo hold. Below that, in smaller text, stunted growth. Malformed wings. Blind in one eye. Recommend immediate disposal. Jake read it twice, feeling anger build in his chest. Defective, he muttered. They called you defective. He looked back at the corner where the tiny dragon was watching him. Even from here, he could see her sides heaving with rapid, shallow breaths. She was probably starving. Definitely dehydrated. Maybe sick. Yeah, well, they're idiots, Jake said to the empty cargo hold. He made his decision right there. His AI assistant started protesting before he even got his jacket off. Jake, harboring an abandoned dragon, violates Station Regulation 7 Alpha, subsection 4. Also Regulations 12C, 18F, and approximately 14 others. I strongly advise. Noted, Jake interrupted, wrapping the dragon gently in his jacket. She was so light. Way too light. He could feel every bone in her small body. And ignored. This could result in fines, imprisonment, or deportation from the station. Then I guess I better not get caught. The walk back to his shop felt like it took forever. Jake kept the bundle close to his chest, trying to look casual. Just a mechanic heading home after a late shift. Nothing unusual. His heart hammered every time someone passed him in the corridor. The dragon stayed perfectly still, like she understood they needed to be quiet. Jake's shop was small, tucked away in the industrial sector of Station Kepler 7, where nobody asked too many questions. He'd been running it for 5 years now, ever since he'd left Earth looking for something more than the life his parents had planned for him. He cleared out his storage room, pushing aside boxes of spare parts and old equipment. It wasn't much, but it was warm and safe. He laid the dragon down on a pile of clean shop rags and she immediately curled into a tight ball. I'm gonna call you Ember, Jake said, filling a bowl with water. Because you're still glowing even if nobody else can see it. The dragon, Ember, watched him with that one bright eye as he set the water near her. She didn't move. Just kept watching. Jake sat down on the floor a few feet away. I've seen enough in this galaxy to know that worthless usually just means nobody bothered to look closer. I'm gonna look closer, okay? I'm gonna help you. Ember blinked slowly, then finally lowered her head to the water and drank. Jake smiled. It was a start. What he didn't know, sitting there in his little storage room with a broken dragon nobody wanted, was that this moment would change everything. Not just for him. Not just for Ember. But for the entire galaxy. Sometimes the most important things come in the smallest, most unexpected packages. 3 months had passed since Jake brought Ember home, and the little dragon had become part of his daily routine. Every morning she'd wake him up by chirping and nudging his arm with her snout. Every evening she'd curl up on the workbench while he repaired ship engines and faulty wiring, watching him with that one bright amber eye. But she hadn't grown. Not even an inch. Jake tried everything. Special foods imported from 3 different star systems. Supplements recommended by every database he could access. Nothing worked. Ember stayed small, barely reaching his knee when she stood on her back legs. Her twisted wings still jutted out at that painful angle, and when she tried to fly, she'd only manage a clumsy hop before tumbling back down. The worst part was the fire. Dragons were supposed to breathe fire. Everyone knew that. But when Ember tried, all she managed were little sparks that fizzled out before they even left her mouth. Jake watched her practice for hours sometimes, seeing the frustration in her eyes when nothing happened. "It's okay, girl," he'd tell her, scratching behind her horns the way she liked. "You don't need to breathe fire to be special." But the rest of the station didn't see it that way. Word spread fast in the cramped corridors of Kepler 7. A human mechanic keeping a worthless dragon. Jake heard the whispers every time he went to the market. Saw the stares when he walked through the common areas. Some people laughed. Others shook their heads like he was wasting his time on a lost cause. Then the offer started coming. First, it was a research facility from the outer colonies. They wanted to buy Ember for genetic experiments. Study why she couldn't grow properly. Maybe learn something useful from her failure, they said. Jake told them to get lost. Next came a religious group. They believed all dragons were sacred no matter how broken. They wanted to take Ember to their temple, put her in a cage made of gold, and worship her like some kind of holy relic. Jake refused that too. The messages kept coming. Scientists, collectors, people who saw Ember as property, as something to own and use. Jake deleted every single one. Then one evening, everything changed. Jake was closing up his shop, locking the front entrance while Ember waited beside him. The industrial sector was quiet this late. Most workers had gone home hours ago. That's probably why they chose that moment. 4 figures stepped out of the shadows. Aliens. Big ones. They wore the black armor of the Consortium, the corporate military force that handled enforcement for the largest companies in the galaxy. Their weapons were already drawn. Jake's hand instinctively went to Ember, putting himself between her and the enforcers. "Jake Riley," the lead enforcer said, his voice coming through a helmet translator. "We're here for the dragon specimen. Hand it over and we won't have any problems." "She's not in it," Jake said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "And she's not going anywhere." The enforcer took a step forward. Jake could see plasma rifles, shock batons, and what looked like a neural disruptor. Equipment designed to subdue without killing. They wanted Ember alive. "We're authorized to use force. The Consortium has legal claim to all abandoned specimens found in their vessels. That dragon belongs to them." "The hell she does." Jake spread his arms wider, making himself a bigger barrier. "She's not property. She's a living being and she stays with me." Behind him, Ember made a sound Jake had never heard before. A low, vibrating hum that seemed to come from deep in her chest. He glanced back and saw her scales starting to shimmer, catching the dim light in strange ways. The lead enforcer raised his plasma rifle, pointing it directly at Jake's chest. "Last chance, human. Move aside." "No." That's when Ember exploded with light. Not fire. Not anything Jake had ever seen before. Her entire body lit up like a miniature star, blazing with pure white energy. The air around her crackled and popped. Jake felt every hair on his body stand up from the static electricity. Then a wave of electromagnetic force burst outward from Ember's small body. The plasma rifles died mid-charge, their power cells instantly drained. The enforcer's armor locked up, servos freezing. Their cybernetic implants sparked and failed. The neural disruptor exploded in a shower of sparks. Even the corridor lights flickered and went dark. All 4 enforcers dropped to their knees, clutching their heads. Their neural implants, the technology wired directly into their brains, had been temporarily fried by the pulse. They weren't dead, but they weren't getting up anytime soon either. Jake stood frozen, staring at Ember. The light faded from her scales and she looked up at him, looking as surprised as he felt. Little arcs of electricity still danced across her body. "What the hell was that?" Jake whispered. Ember chirped, then wobbled and sat down hard. Whatever she'd just done had exhausted her. Jake scooped her up and ran. He didn't stop until they were back inside his shop with every lock engaged. The next morning, Jake called the only person he could trust. Lisa worked in the station's xenobiology lab, and she'd been helping him take care of Ember on the side. When she arrived and saw the recording from Jake's security camera, her face went white. "I need to scan her," Lisa said. "Right now." An hour later, Lisa sat down heavily, staring at the scanner results like they'd just rewritten everything she knew about biology. "Jake," she said slowly, "Ember's not defective." "What?" "She's not even fully grown. Look at these cellular readings. She's in a chrysalis stage like a caterpillar before it becomes a butterfly. Her body is restructuring itself at the genetic level." Lisa looked up and Jake saw actual fear in her eyes. "This isn't a failed dragon. This is something new. Something evolved." "Evolved how?" "Her mutation gave her electromagnetic abilities. No dragon in recorded history has ever had powers like this. She can generate EMP pulses, manipulate electrical fields, probably more that we haven't seen yet." Lisa pulled up more data. "And if these readings are right, her transformation is just beginning. She's going to change even more." Jake looked at Ember, who was happily chewing on a piece of scrap metal, completely unaware of how special she was. She chirped at him and rubbed against his leg like a cat wanting attention. "We need to keep her hidden," Lisa warned, gathering her equipment. "If the Galactic Council finds out what she can do, if the military contractors get wind of this." But it was already too late. The enforcers had helmet cameras. The consortium had seen everything. And in a galaxy where information was the most valuable commodity, word was already spreading. Somewhere in the depths of space, powerful people were learning about a tiny dragon who could shut down technology with a thought. And they all wanted her. The station erupted into chaos within 3 days. Jake first noticed it when he went to buy food for Ember. The market was buzzing with rumors. Military ships had docked overnight. Government officials were questioning shopkeepers. People kept glancing at him nervously, then looking away fast when he made eye contact. By evening, armed contractors were patrolling the corridors. Jake recognized the uniforms. Mercenaries from at least 3 different star systems, all hired by corporations who wanted Ember. They weren't even trying to be subtle anymore. Then came the official announcement. The Galactic Council had declared Ember a priority specimen for scientific study. They used fancy words, talked about the advancement of knowledge and the good of all species. But Jake knew what it really meant. They wanted to take Ember, cut her open, and figure out what made her special. She wouldn't survive the process. They didn't care. Jake wasn't letting that happen. Not while he still had breath in his body. Lisa showed up at his shop that night with a data pad full of bad news. "They're issuing a warrant for your arrest tomorrow morning. Illegal possession of a protected specimen. They're going to raid your shop at dawn." "Then we leave before dawn," Jake said simply. "And go where?" "They'll track you anywhere on this station." "Then we leave the station." Lisa stared at him. "Jake, that's insane. You'll be a fugitive. They'll hunt you across the entire galaxy." Jake looked at Ember, who was sleeping peacefully on her pile of rags, tiny and trusting. "I don't care." They moved fast. Lisa knew the maintenance tunnels better than most station security. She'd worked here for 8 years and had explored every cramped passage and forgotten access shaft. She led them through the guts of the station, away from the main corridors where cameras watched everything. Beth joined them at Junction 7. She was a dock worker, a Talarian with 6 arms and a bad attitude toward authority. Jake had fixed her personal shuttle once for free when she couldn't afford the repairs. She remembered. "I can get you to docking bay 12, Beth said, her translator making her clicking sounds into rough English. "My cousin works security there. He owes me. But after that, you're on your own." Old Mike met them near the cargo processing center. He was human, probably in his 70s, with a limp from an old loading accident. He'd worked in the cargo bays for 40 years and hated every rule and regulation the station had ever made. "Heard you need a ship," Mike said, grinning. "I got one. Well borrowed. The owner won't miss it for a few hours." "Mike, they'll arrest you for helping us." "Let them try. I'm retiring next month anyway. Might as well go out with a story." They were almost to the docking bays when everything went wrong. The consortium was waiting. 10 mercenaries blocked the corridor ahead, spread out in a tactical formation. These weren't regular enforcers. These were professional soldiers and they'd come prepared. Jake could see the magnetic restraint fields in their hands, specialized equipment designed specifically for capturing creatures with electromagnetic abilities. They'd studied Ember. They knew what she could do. "It's over, human," the squad leader said. His voice was calm, professional. "Step aside. You've caused enough trouble." Jake's hand went to his belt and pulled out his plasma cutter. It was just a tool for cutting through metal plating, not made for fighting. But it was all he had. "No." The mercenaries raised their weapons. Jake heard Lisa gasp behind him. Beth's 6 arms were empty. Mike had nothing but his cane. They were completely outmatched. Then Jake felt it. Heat building behind him. That familiar hum vibrating through the air. Ember had woken up. She'd sensed his fear. Her body began to glow, but differently this time. Brighter. More intense. The light hurt to look at directly. Jake felt the air pressure change, his ears popping like they did during rapid decompression. Then Ember started to grow. Her body convulsed, expanding rapidly. In seconds she went from the size of a dog to a pony. Then bigger. Horse-sized. Her twisted wings suddenly cracked, bones shifting and reforming with sounds that made Jake's stomach turn. The wings straightened, spreading wide. Her scales brightened, shifting colors like oil on water. Energy crackled around her like lightning during a storm. The floor beneath her glowed red from the heat. The mercenaries stepped back, their confidence evaporating. Ember threw up an electromagnetic shield that surrounded both her and Jake in a shimmering dome of pure energy. The mercenaries fired. Their weapons sparked and died the instant the energy touched the shield. Their armor seized up, servos locking. The magnetic restraint fields exploded in their hands. They couldn't move, trapped in their own frozen armor like statues. For a moment, Jake thought they'd won. Then Ember collapsed. The shield vanished. The energy died. And Ember was shrinking again, her body returning to its small size as she fell. Jake caught her before she hit the ground. She was barely breathing, her scales dim and lifeless. "No, no, no," Jake whispered, feeling for a heartbeat. It was there but weak and irregular. "Ember, stay with me." She'd burned through her own life force to protect him. The transformation had cost her too much. His communicator pinged. An encrypted message from an unknown sender. Jake almost ignored it, but something made him look. Coordinates. A location deep in the Drift Nebula. And a message. Sanctuary for dragons and those who guard them. Come quickly. She needs to complete her transformation in safety, not in pieces like this. She's killing herself trying to protect you. Bring her home. The last keeper. Jake looked at Ember dying in his arms. Looked at station security flooding into the corridor from both directions. Looked at his friends who'd risked everything to help him. He made his choice in less than a second. "Mike, I need that ship. Right now." They ran. Lisa and Beth held off security with nothing but cargo containers. They toppled into the corridor. Mike hotwired the docking bay doors. Jake carried Ember, unconscious and frighteningly light, onto the small cargo ship Mike had stolen. 20 minutes later, Jake Riley left everything he'd ever known. His shop. His life. His identity as a law-abiding citizen. He became a fugitive, running into the darkness of space with the most valuable creature in the galaxy sleeping in his arms. But he didn't hesitate. Not even once. Some things were worth losing everything for. The Drift Nebula was worse than anything Jake had imagined. His stolen ship bucked and shook as electromagnetic storms hammered the hull. The navigation computer had died within the first hour, fried by the constant energy pulses. Jake was flying blind, following coordinates he couldn't even verify were real. He should have been terrified. He probably was, somewhere under the exhaustion and worry. But then something strange happened. Ember, still weak and barely conscious in the co-pilot seat, started making soft sounds. Not distress sounds. Guiding sounds. Every time Jake started to veer off course, she'd chirp or hum, directing him left or right with an instinct he couldn't explain. She was navigating through the chaos like she'd been born to it. "I'm trusting you, girl," Jake muttered, adjusting course based on her signals. "Please don't let us fly into a star or something." 3 hours into the nebula, when Jake's hands were cramping from gripping the controls and his eyes were burning from staring at the swirling colors outside, the station appeared. It materialized out of the electromagnetic soup like a ghost ship. Massive. Ancient. Built from materials Jake had never seen before, with architecture that looked older than human spaceflight. It didn't show up on any scanner, any map, any database Jake had ever accessed. It was completely hidden from the galaxy. Had been for who knows how long. Jake guided the ship into a docking bay that opened for them like it had been expecting their arrival. The moment he touched down and cut the engines, his whole body sagged with relief. They'd made it. Whatever it was. A figure waited at the airlock. Human. Female. Older, probably in her 70s, with short gray hair and eyes that looked like they'd witnessed things Jake couldn't imagine. She wore simple clothes, nothing fancy, but carried herself with the kind of confidence that came from decades of knowing exactly who you were. Jake carefully lifted Ember and stepped off the ship. The woman studied them both with an expression he couldn't quite read. You actually came, she said. Her voice was rough, like she didn't use it much. Most people wouldn't risk it. They'd convince themselves it was a trap or a joke. But you came. You said she was dying, Jake replied. What choice did I have? The woman's expression softened slightly. She looked at Ember, still small and dim in Jake's arms. She's beautiful. And so very important, though neither of you understand why yet. Who are you? My name is Rachel Stone. I'm the last keeper. She gestured for him to follow. Come. We don't have much time. She's burning out too fast. Rachel led Jake through corridors that felt ancient. The walls hummed with power, but it wasn't like any technology Jake recognized. This was something else. Something older. They reached a massive central chamber and Jake stopped dead in his tracks. 3 dragons lay resting in the enormous space. But these weren't like Ember. These were the dragons from Legends. Massive creatures, each one the size of a small spaceship. Their scales were dulled with age, their bodies marked with countless scars, but their eyes glowed with intelligence that made Jake feel very small and very young. The dragons raised their heads as Jake entered carrying Ember. Something passed between them and the tiny dragon in his arms. A recognition that went beyond words or sight. What is this place? Jake whispered. The last sanctuary, Rachel said. The last place dragons are safe. I've been guarding them for 40 years. Before me it was someone else. We've been hiding them for 3,000 years. Hiding them from what? Rachel's face hardened. The galaxy likes to tell a story about dragons. Says they were hunted to extinction for their organs, their scales, their bones. All valuable commodities. She walked closer to one of the ancient dragons, placing a hand on its scarred hide. But that's a lie. A comfortable lie that lets the major powers sleep at night. Then what's the truth? The truth is that ancient dragons had abilities that terrified every government and corporation in the galaxy. They could disable entire fleets with a thought. Communicate across star systems without any technology. Survive in the vacuum of space itself. They were power that couldn't be controlled or bought or weaponized. Rachel looked at Jake. So they were systematically exterminated. Not for profit. For fear. Jake looked down at Ember, understanding dawning. And Ember? She's a throwback. Her mutations aren't defects. They're ancient abilities resurfacing after thousands of years of suppression. She's what dragons used to be before fear made them hide their true nature. The 3 elderly dragons moved. Slowly, carefully they approached Jake and Ember. Their massive heads lowered and they touched Ember gently with their snouts. Light began to flow. Jake watched, mesmerized as energy passed from the old dragons into Ember's small body. It wasn't just power. It was something deeper. Memories, knowledge, everything their species had been, flowing into her like water filling an empty vessel. Ember's body began to glow, then to grow. This time the transformation was different. Controlled. Natural. Her body expanded smoothly, bones and muscles forming properly. Her twisted wings straightened with a sound like a sail catching wind. Her scales brightened, shimmering with colors Jake didn't have names for. Colors that seemed to shift and change depending on how you looked at them. She grew to the size of the stolen ship outside. Then bigger. Magnificent. Her wings spread wide enough to cast shadows across the entire chamber. Both eyes were now perfect, glowing with the same amber light but brighter. Fuller. Her presence filled the space, commanding and ancient and powerful. Jake felt something touch his mind. Not invading. Gentle. Like someone knocking on a door. Then words formed. Not in his ears. In his thoughts. You saved me when I was nothing. When the entire galaxy said I was worthless. That bond cannot be broken. You are mine and I am yours. Forever. Ember's voice. Clear and strong and undeniably real. Jake's legs almost gave out. Rachel caught his arm, steadying him. Congratulations, Rachel said, and there was sadness in her smile. You're the first human in 3,000 years to be claimed by a dragon. That's a bond that lasts lifetimes. Multiple lifetimes. You're connected to her now in ways you can't even comprehend yet. Jake stared at the magnificent creature before him. The tiny, broken dragon he'd found in a cargo hold. She'd become something beyond imagination. What happens now? He asked. Rachel looked at Ember, then back at Jake. Now you both change the galaxy. Whether it's ready or not. Jake assumed that was it. The end of their journey together. Ember had finally found her people, other dragons who understood what she was. The sanctuary was safe, hidden, protected. She could live here in peace, away from the galaxy that had tried to kill her. It made sense for her to stay. Jake told himself he was okay with that. He'd saved her life. That was enough. That had to be enough. He was packing up his few belongings from the stolen ship, preparing to figure out what came next for him, when Ember's voice filled his mind. "What are you doing?" Jake jumped. He still wasn't used to the telepathy thing. "Getting ready to leave. You're safe now. You don't need me anymore." There was a long pause. Then Ember's massive head appeared in the ship's cargo bay doorway. She had to duck to fit. "I'm coming with you." "What?" "No. Ember, you belong here with your own kind. My kind are elders hiding in fear. You showed me another way." Her amber eyes locked onto his. "We're not hiding anymore. We're going back. Together. They'll try to kill you. The council, the corporations, everyone who's afraid of what you can do. Let them try." Energy crackled around her scales. "I'm done being afraid. The galaxy needs to see what dragons really are." Rachel found them arguing an hour later. She listened to both sides, then smiled that sad smile of hers. "She's made her choice, Jake. Dragons are stubborn that way. Besides, she's right. Hiding hasn't saved her species. Maybe it's time for something different." So they went back. Together. They emerged from the Drift Nebula 3 days later, and immediately every sensor in a dozen star systems lit up. A dragon. A real, full-grown dragon with power signatures that made military analysts panic. The Galactic Council sent warships. 12 of them, fully armed, with orders to contain or eliminate the threat. Jake watched from Ember's back as the ships approached. She'd insisted he ride with her, said their bond worked better with physical contact. He'd never imagined flying through space on a dragon's back, but here he was, somehow breathing normally despite the vacuum around them. Ember's electromagnetic field protected them both. "This is going to be bad," Jake said. "No," Ember replied in his mind. "This is going to be necessary." The warships opened fire. Plasma cannons, railguns, missile swarms. Enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Ember didn't dodge. Didn't run. She just stopped, hovering in space, and released a pulse of electromagnetic energy. Every weapon died. Every engine shut down. Every computer system went dark. 12 massive warships became floating chunks of metal, completely powerless but undamaged. The crews were safe, just stuck. "Message sent," Ember said. But she wasn't done. Jake felt her gathering power, felt energy building around them like a storm. Then she did something he didn't know was possible. She broadcast. Not sound. Not radio waves. Direct telepathic transmission to every sentient mind within 30 light-years. Millions of beings across dozens of star systems suddenly heard Ember's voice in their heads at the same moment. She showed them the truth. The real history of the dragons. The genocide committed not for resources but for fear. The lies told to justify extinction. The survivors hiding for 3,000 years. Everything. Jake watched it happen through their bond. Watched millions of minds receive information that shattered the comfortable stories they'd been told. Some rejected it immediately. Others questioned. But nobody could unhear it. Galactic politics exploded overnight. Governments scrambled to respond. Corporations denied involvement. History scholars started digging through old records. Some species demanded accountability. Others called it propaganda. But Ember had accomplished what she wanted. The conversation had started. Rachel had been right about something else too. There were more dragons out there. Dozens of them, scattered across the galaxy, hiding in fear. Ember's transformation, her emergence, her refusal to hide anymore, sent a signal to them all. If one could be free, maybe they all could. Within a year, young dragons began appearing. They'd been hiding as small, defective creatures like Ember had been. Now they stopped hiding. They transformed. Each one developed unique abilities, powers that had been suppressed for generations. The species everyone thought was extinct suddenly became impossible to ignore. And Jake found himself in a position he never imagined. The Galactic Council, desperate to avoid a war with dragons they couldn't possibly fight, created a new position. Guardian. Someone to act as a bridge between dragons and other species. They offered it to Jake. The human mechanic who'd saved a worthless dragon. He accepted on one condition. He got to keep his shop. So Jake returned to Station Kepler 7. Not as a fugitive with a bounty on his head, but as an official ambassador with full diplomatic protection. His little repair shop in the industrial sector became neutral ground where species met to negotiate with dragons. It was surreal. Politicians and corporate executives sitting on his old workbench, negotiating treaties while Jake fixed broken machinery and Ember watched from the corner. She often curled up in her old spot, right where she used to sleep when she was small and broken. Visitors found it strange. This magnificent creature who could disable fleets, who had single-handedly changed the balance of power in the galaxy, choosing to stay in a grimy mechanic's shop. But Jake understood. He was working on a shuttle engine one evening, hands covered in grease like always, when Ember's voice filled his mind. They see me as I am now. Powerful. Dangerous. Important. But you saw me when I was nothing. When I was just a broken thing left to die. That's why I stay. Jake smiled, not looking up from his work. You were never broken, Ember. Just different. I know. You showed me that. You showed the entire galaxy that. There was warmth in her mental voice. One human refusing to accept that any life was worthless changed everything. Jake wiped the grease from his hands and walked over to scratch behind Ember's massive horns, right where she liked it. She rumbled contentedly, electromagnetic energy crackling softly around them both like a purr. Yeah, he said quietly, looking at the stars through the shop window. Guess it does. The universe had changed. A human mechanic's simple act of compassion, saving what everyone else called worthless, had resurrected an entire species and shifted the balance of power across the stars. Sometimes the greatest revolutions start with the smallest kindnesses. And sometimes all it takes to change everything is one person who refuses to walk away from something broken.